Okay. If you'd like to go ahead and address those, Dr. Christie, and then what we'll do from there, since we've kind of changed the transcript here and we kind of went with addressing those three things first. If you'd like to go ahead and address those three things, then we'll go back to let you guys tell about your personal experiences with atheism and why you think it is more male dominated.
Okay, I'm actually going to do the questions sort of in a reversed order. I'll take the gaming one at the end because I think it's less connected. So you really brought up two, let's call them possible ideas of why women are underrepresented in atheism, and that might be emotional sides or some sort of like interpersonal communal benefits. And I should step back a little bit and say that I have my PhD from the University of Essex is in political behavior and sex and gender and political attitudes. And the reason that I started down that road was because I noticed that when we measured the man and the woman in our surveys, what we're measuring is a biological category. So we measure whether or not someone has the sort of equipment, or maybe they identify with that. But let's just say, because we have a very small transgendered population, we've got a big one. Like for 95%, it's going to be based on your biology. But when they wanted to explain things, they would come down to things like, well, women are more likely to be mothers, or men are more likely to be providers. And my observation was, well, that's not what you're measuring. You're not measuring providers, you're not measuring mothers, you're measuring men and women. And when there's a sex difference, you're just relying on sexual stereotypes to fill in the gaps, but you're not actually showing a causal relationship between, say, a woman becoming a parent and her more likely to vote for a Democrat to have a social safety net, along these lines. And so that was my critique, and I brought in measures from psychology of agency, or how much you feel control of your life, independence, competitiveness, regardless of if you're a man or a woman, and how much you feel connected to others, or how communal you feel, again, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman. And my sample size was taken in Britain, but it was about 3,000 Britons based using an internet sample. And my doctoral thesis revealed that when you include these gendered measures, these measures of agency and communion, a lot of times I could make the sex difference go away. So in other words, it was more important that a woman had a high sense of agency in predicting that she was going to vote for the conservative, and more important that a man had a high sense of connectedness and communion that he was going to vote for the Labour Party than them being men or women. It was just the case that women scored higher on communal measures and men scored higher on agentic measures. So it looked like men were doing things more than women, but it was really those characteristics. And I wanted to bring that also to the atheist community and kind of unpack this, because I think we also have a tendency to look at sex differences and try to reduce them down to individual differences. And I do think that there are some individual differences, but I think that in terms of women's underrepresentation in atheism, when we started discussing this, there isn't, from my own, just looking around the internet, and again, this isn't my specialty, but I don't see a lot about women and atheism. Nice crown. And the thing that I want to bring to this is, if we look at studies about atheists, one of the biggest defining things is intelligence. And intelligence really comes down to access to education. So one of the things I want to do to kind of break apart this myth that women are always more religious is, there was a study that I'm citing from 2012, and this is it's a Wynne Gallup International Global Index of Religiosity and Atheism. And they had 51,000 people from around the world who responded to the survey. And when they took all of the people who said that they were not religious, they found that 12% of all the men who said they were non-religious were convinced atheists. And 14% of women were convinced atheists. So when women are atheists, we're as atheists as men are atheists. It's just that we have more women who are religious than we have men who are religious. And also, this religiosity gap is the biggest in the United States, which is another form of American exceptionalism. The gap in other countries isn't quite so big, and you see women in more secular countries outside the United States being closer to men in their secularism and whatnot. Women are still generally more religious, but it's not a foregone conclusion that women won't be atheists. So then the question becomes, why are women more religious? And one of the explanations that I would like to put forth and start to have a real conversation about is ties into my research into deconversion. So you know about me as a political behavioralist, and I've become an atheist activist, and one of the things I've started doing is actually listening to people's deconversion stories and the process that someone goes through. And in particular, I have a pilot study of about 13 North American former Christians who became atheists. And one of the very important steps in becoming an atheist is when you leave religion, you need an alternative worldview to land in. You need something else to help orient you with what is going on in the world. And for the people in these deconversion stories, they're using the internet and having these sort of, intellectual renaissance where they're learning about the Bible and they're learning arguments against apologetics and they're learning about evolution correctly for the first time. They're learning about moral philosophy. And all of this education, when they reject their religious worldview, gives them a place to land. So education is really the key, I think, if we want to see people walking away from a faith-based, superstitious worldview into an evidence-based and reason one. If we also look at the industries and the areas where you have the highest amount of atheists, it's going to be in the natural sciences, the hard sciences, and in those areas. And if we look throughout history, really women have only had access to those disciplines in the last 30 years. I mean, so men, you guys have like 6,000 years a head start on having the access to the information to allow you an atheist worldview. Because if you have some college and you're working in Plover, Wisconsin, yeah, you might have suspicions, but if you don't have something that's an alternative to your religious worldview, maybe you'll be like going to some kind of woo-woo superstition stuff, but you're basically only able to operate within the world that you can function in according to what you know. And that is a direct result of how much access you have to education. So one of the other things that got picked up from my research here is that when men become atheists easier, obviously, because you guys have greater access to education and it's also more acceptable, and you don't have as much of an influence with patriarchy telling you what your sexual values are and how you should judge yourself. It's another thing that religion does to women. But as men become more atheists, women will also become more atheists too. So we do see this trend where atheism is on the rise, and it's really America where the sex gap is the largest. So I'll stop talking because I've been talking for a long time, and I've hoped to give you something to think about.
You make a lot of really good points there, Kristi, and it's a lot along the same lines that I was thinking of too, that you're kind of confirming there. And I know there's been some studies done too in like the UK. I watched a video by noelplum a couple weeks back where he looked into this, and they did some study about 9,000 individuals over about 30 years, going back to the 1970s, and they came out with this information like over half of men were considering themselves atheists, and only about a third of women. And that held true for both, organized religion as well as just general spirituality type deal. So yeah, it's very interesting, and that's why I appreciate all you women coming on tonight to give your perspective on this, because we're five white guys sitting around here talking, so it's really nice to have a female perspective and not just be sitting here taking guesses at what's going on. So I really do appreciate you giving your perspective on this, and I look forward to hearing your personal experiences. But I do agree that education is huge, and you made a point that I was going to make, which is that obviously the education opportunities haven't been there for women until fairly recently. So I think as women are able to catch up in education, we'll kind of see atheism also correlate to that be on the rise within the female gender, and also it's just it's weird because I'm just curious as how many women have, because even as women are getting educations, are they in these fields like science and technology and things that are more likely to make you an atheist? And I know they are more, becoming more frequently in those fields as well. So, and then the other thing is are women as active online? Because like Alice was mentioning, it's really an online community within, if you want to call it the atheist community at large, it's really an online deal. Most of the people that I know that are atheists, I talk to online. So we don't have these opportunities to meet up with other atheists. I mean, you can find them certainly, but I think that's another thing too, is kind of was mentioned a little bit earlier, that women tend to crave these or need these interpersonal relationships more than men do to meet in person and things like that. So that's pretty much my comments, and you know, whoever else wants to jump in, go ahead. But thanks for giving us your perspective there.
I think you brought up a lot of valid points. Dieter also mentioned there that women are actually earning more college degrees than men now, which is something, you know, even I, in my subjective experience, have seen going to college when I'm like the only guy in my class full of, you know, a class full of 30 women, and I'm the only guy in there. And the other thing, too, is what you mentioned is that men had the access to this education, but it also seems that men are going after college educations that seem to lead people to atheism, basically science, because we know based on polls and studies that when you have science, you have someone in the science field, they're more likely to be an atheist, just based on the basic polls and studies. So do you think that that has anything to do with it as well, that women are not, you know, going after these physics majors and things like that?
Was that question directed at me?
To anyone.
Well, I think, you know, one of the things is we have to look at the ways in which women have traditionally and still continue to be, you know, tracked away from those, tracked into pink-collar jobs. And the way you phrase it, it kind of sounds, you know, like women should just get up and do these kinds of things, which, you know, I agree. And I know that increasingly women are, yeah, and girls are. But we first need to make young girls think that they can be scientists and not just, you know, have Barbie dolls that say things like math is hard. And we need work-friendly places so that when we get these degrees, they don't just end up, you know, going to Silicon Valley and then working in places that are so hostile that they end up quitting. So it's a larger question about women's involvement in science, and I think we have to look historically at how, you know, women really have been excluded from a lot of these these areas, and when women have gone into education, they've been encouraged to go into teaching and cosmetics and traditional pink-collar jobs. So I think I would hope part of the atheist movement would actually be encouraging more women to get into science, because that is the best path to give you a firm evidence-based grounding, and also to teach you how to think correctly, how to think rigorously. And as much as it's great that women have a natural advantage toward languages, and men as boys have a natural advantage towards thinking abstractly, I think it's really important that if we do want to see atheism increase, and everybody has to know how to think critically, and that means everyone feeling welcome in the natural sciences. So.
Go for it, Dieter.
I'd like to kind of jump in real quick. I don't think I look as handsome as Dieter. But you know, I actually had a friend that was that went to my college, and you know, she got a STEM degree. She got a bachelor's in computer engineering, and you know, one of the things that she said when she got out was that she really wasn't interested in the field. She was more or less interested in getting a good job out of the field. And when she actually got out of the field and into a job, she actually got a job doing something that wasn't necessarily related to engineering, but it kind of helped that she had an engineering degree. So I'm just kind of wondering, Kristi, what are your thoughts on those women that kind of, I guess, go through the whole STEM thing, but then don't really apply their degree?
Well, I mean, that's just an anecdote, so I don't know that it's really. I think my point tying these things together is that I actually, you know, I wasn't taught, in my opinion, how to think rigorously until I started my master's degree. And that's really ridiculous, given that we have an opportunity to teach kids critical thinking skills from a very young age. So by encouraging women to get into STEM in terms of relating it to atheism, it's that it finally provides you with the grounding you need to have an alternative to superstition and faith-based wishful thinking. And that's the connection between atheism and STEM. In terms of, you know, lots of people go, I've got a friend who has a degree in philosophy. He's now a university administrator, but he's got a job, and that's the important thing. So I don't want to, like, get into career paths, but what I do want to do is make the connection between encouraging women in the natural sciences and also critical thinking for boys and girls, especially in the United States, so that people can question ridiculous claims such as somebody lived in the belly of a whale for 3 days, and not just say that sounds crap to me, but this sounds crap to me because I learned in my biology class X, Y, and Z. So that's more my interest in bringing those topics together. That was me done.
Okay, so
Oh.
I booted Sarah so that we could try to get her back in here, but now it's saying that since I booted her, she's no longer allowed to join. Have you guys ever encountered that before?
Well, don't you just feel like a jackass?
Oh no, here I am exercising my misogyny. Dr. Kristi's next.
Please don't boot me. Well, then I can just go to bed because it is getting on, what is it, like 3:30 in the morning here my time, so.
All right. Well. Wait, should I go now? I guess. I see some nodding, some confused smiles. I'll go with that. Hello, I'm Data Lucum. I definitely love
Yeah, I'd say go ahead and go, Dieter.
What? I'm already talking, G. Wait, can everyone hear me? Okay. Sorry, G threw me for a second. Okay, so I'm Data Lucum. I definitely enjoy everyone's comments. I don't agree with all of them, but that's me. I do that a lot. Two things I really wanted to get into. One of them is life sciences, like biology sciences, are already dominated by women. It's not like a huge domination, but it is majority women now. And that can be judged for a whole lot of different things. There is the idea that women tend to work well with things they can actually like see developing in front of them, and guys tend to be able to think about really abstract concepts better, like mathematical constructs or stuff like that. But I don't really put too much stock in that because people vary so much from person to person. But that being said, it's definitely interesting that that seems to be the trend now. But the more interesting thing that I wanted to bring up is I wish I had looked this study up before I came here, but a huge meta-analysis of why women specifically are not getting into more, I guess, complex STEM fields like engineering after they went through like socioeconomic status, after they went through like discrimination within the field, when they went through all these different variables, it seemed like the biggest contributor is women being in engineering. And this actually goes for every group that is not already within the field, like minority groups. It turns out that having a physical role model that already exists in the field is the largest contributor to whether or not someone decides they want to join that field. So as far as it goes for engineering, we need more female engineers. Basically just to go, I'll do it. I don't care who's already there. Like the first pushers when a new product comes out. You need those people just to go, I don't care about the risks. I'm just going to go do it. And it's working, slowly. But I find that fascinating, and I think that actually that can be spread to things like atheism or gaming culture, because gaming culture was thrown in, so I thought I'd throw it in. All that's really necessary is having people that are already there that people can look up to. It doesn't necessarily have to be like your hero that you aspire to be in the culture, but it's just proving that you can, and that there aren't the barriers that you just thought there were. And the thing I put in the description, or I guess the chat on the side, there is a small but very nice list of influential women already in atheism. And I think that's freaking fantastic. And I understand that a lot of these cultures started out as boys' clubs, but it's been opened up, and that's great. And I wanted to continue, because it's not a boys' club and never was supposed to be. So, good job, various women that have already breached that, and I highly encourage more people to do so. It's not difficult anymore. The community is more or less welcoming.